I've said this a handful of times and I'm gonna say it again. If there's one thing I took away from the internet's collective Game of the Year discussions, it's that I should have been playing Dead Cells all this time. So I finally did, and immediately realized how badly I fucked up by not playing it sooner. Why didn't I jump on Dead Cells when everyone was raving about it? I like run-based games. I don't seek out a ton to play, but the ones I do choose end up engrossing me in ways that not many games do. Spelunky, Enter the Gungeon, Moonlighter, these are all games I initially planned to just play on the side while focusing on finishing a different, larger game. Something to pick up and play on a whim to break up the long play sessions those bigger games demand from me. But it rarely ends up that way. Those run-based games quickly took over my playtime and became the main game I would focus on. They got me hooked. Enter Dead Cells. I foolishly told myself the same thing. I'll do a run here and there when I have some downtime between other things. But one run became 2, then 3, each time getting a little further into the game. And before I knew it, I was spending hours at a time playing Dead Cells. One more run, I would say to myself, no matter how late it was, knowing very well that another run would easily be another 40 minutes at least. I know my track record, I know my relationship with run-based games. Of course this would happen again with Dead Cells. So again, I have to ask myself, why did it take so long for me to give Dead Cells a shot? And I think the key to finding that out for me lies within the way people described this game when it came out. They used a term that is used a lot when talking about genres in video games. Metroidvania. Nothing against Metroidvania style games, but they generally don't interest me unless it's an actual Metroid game. So of course I see people describing Dead Cells as such with an added touch of Souls-like, and I'm checking out of that conversation almost immediately. It wasn't until I heard some more in-depth conversations about Dead Cells where I started to see that calling it a Metroidvania isn't completely accurate. Yes, Dead Cells has that iconic Metroidvania style map, and yes, you get new abilities that open up new areas, but you're not backtracking to get to any of those new areas, and those abilities aren't going to help you defeat any new kinds of enemies either. You can actually finish the game without any of these abilities, in fact. Well, except for maybe the Vine Rune. I think that one is necessary. My point is that not having these abilities doesn't really stop your forward progress. They just open up new paths for you to take during your next run, which is definitely something you want to do to experience all of Dead Cells' goodies. But you don't have to. And even the Souls comparison I find to be very surface level. Dead Cells shares elements with those kinds of games for sure, namely the flasks and the upgrade currency that gets lost on death, but I don't think of Dead Cells as a game in either of those two genres. I know the developers themselves directly use these terms to describe their game, but I see that use more as simple shorthand than actual genre solidifying descriptors. Dead Cells takes characteristics from those kinds of games, but cleverly uses them to support its randomized run-based nature. Once I got past that mental block keeping me from playing Dead Cells in the first place, I found a near endless love for it. Whenever I pick up Dead Cells, I never want to put it down, and a lot of that has to do with how great it controls. We talk a lot about this nebulous idea of game feel, but if there are any games that can help put that idea into perspective, Dead Cells is definitely one of them. The mobility in this game is top notch. Running, rolling, wall jumping, and slamming onto enemies from above. Going in between all of these actions is seamless. There's a level of polish in the interactions that make every button press feel so responsive. I could always count on my dodge roll doing exactly what I wanted it to do, even if I just barely caught an incoming attack in the middle of a mess of enemies. I could always tell how a bow would arc without having to second guess my shot, and the combination of sound effects and animation made sure that connecting attacks always gave satisfying feedback. This great game feel extends to every weapon in the game as well. They all have their distinct animations and attack speeds, but they all feel viable and useful. It isn't a matter of good or bad weapons, it's a matter of build preference and playstyle. I for one like playing fast and nimble, but slow and powerful is totally a valid build. I was completely in control of every action I took. That helped make the learning curve much smoother and less intimidating for a game where I was expected to die a lot. And trust me, I did. But I inched my way closer to the next area with every run. I could feel myself getting better at the game the more I played it, and that amazing game feel is what enabled that. But there's more to Dead Cells than just how it feels, of course. There's also how it made me feel. There's an excitement that came with seeing and feeling my skills improve. An excitement and a sense of accomplishment that the game shut right down once I got too cocky. As if to say, nah motherfucker, you ain't hot shit, that was just the second area. But in return, Dead Cells gave me incremental goals to work towards, to build me back up to feeling like hot shit. I broke up my goals into long, medium, and short term, kind of like you would do at a bad corporate self-help event. The long-term goal was as simple as getting to the next rune. I didn't want to just beat the final boss and put the game down. I wanted to get through every unique location the game had at least once. To do that, I needed all the runes. But to get them, I had to be able to take down the elite versions of enemies. So, in the short term, I wanted to better familiarize myself with patterns of specific enemy types. Doing that naturally led into finishing levels faster with more cells and blueprints in my possession, which in turn leads into the midterm goal, where I would be working on spending my cells efficiently to unlock those blueprints and trying out new builds. For example, I instantly gravitated to the health flask upgrades, but because of their high cell cost, I knew it would serve me better to unlock more weapons and the ability to randomize the starting weapon options. And once finding a set of abilities, mutations, and weapons I felt I could master in a run, I got my new rune and started the cycle again for the next area or boss. Since I've touched upon weapons and builds a couple times now, let's dive a little deeper. The variety of weapons and tools Dead Cells gives the player is immense, but not overwhelmingly so. You have to put in the work to unlock them, and like I mentioned earlier, I don't think there are any truly bad weapons. Everything is viable depending on your playstyle, and Dead Cells encourages you to experiment with different builds until you find a few that you really like. Again, I'm incredibly fond of playing fast and loose. I like quick melee weapons like the various daggers and swords. I also throw in the ability to go ranged with bows and bombs, and I don't use shields as much because I'd much rather jump around and dodge roll. But that's just half of it. The other half of my preferred build is survivability. Despite my propensity to quickly deal with enemies, I take my time going through each level in its entirety. I wanted to pick up every power-up scroll I could to increase my health and damage output, focusing my first few on health and brutality, going back and forth between the two, and then supplement them with mutations that make each scroll's power-up even more potent. Dead Cells will reward you with a good weapon and a boatload of cells for speedrunning through levels, at the cost of all the scrolls you would normally pick up within that level. And that just was a deal I wasn't willing to take. I am much more content with my longer runs. It actually added to my sense of accomplishment when I reached the final boss. Once I could consistently make it to the final level, all that time spent in previous levels became suspenseful build-up to the last confrontation. And if I didn't defeat it then, I made it a point to slightly alter my build for the next run. I tried getting rid of my bombs earlier in the run and replacing them with traps, and I reminded myself not to get too attached to a weapon just because of its damage output. Eventually, I made it. I finally beat the last boss for the first time with some moral support from a good friend. It was exhilarating. All that build-up paid off as a giant rush of adrenaline. I felt like I could do anything now. Which, of course, Dead Cells still challenged, asking me to do it again but at a higher difficulty level. And the feedback loop from before starts over yet again. Back to making personal goals, back to unlocking even more new weapons. But I am more than happy to be in this loop again. There's more great things to say about Dead Cells. I love the music, it immediately gets me into the hack and slash zone. I love the look of its pixel art, and the main character has this weirdly sarcastic attitude that I'm really into. But the main thing I want to get across is how my enjoyment of Dead Cells is centered on feelings, both in how it feels to play and all the positive feelings I experienced in return for embracing it. I think Dead Cells is incredible. There's no fault large enough in this game that I feel is worth mentioning. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I'm also not going to sit here digging for a negative point solely to balance out my overwhelmingly positive sentiments. My enthusiasm for Dead Cells knows no bounds, and I think that says enough.